The Victorian Exodus. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard. Today, welcome back Katrina, who has talked to us about this before, I have to say, some of the issues that are going on in Victoria. She's been digging into it again and looking at really what's going on there with people moving out in droves, apparently. But let's dig into some of that. How are you going today, Katrina?
Yeah, very well. Thanks, Chris. How are you going?
I'm good. Now, it's not that you're particularly trying to bash Victoria. You just have some real issues about what's going on there.
Yeah.
And, it's fair for you to have that because you've come from there. You understand what it's like on the ground there. You've been in our Melbourne office. You've had these conversations with lots of different people. But let's just start off today by talking about what is going on there. Why is
Mm.
Victoria expected to lose tens of thousands of residents to other states?
Yeah. I just want to also start off by saying the a lot of Victorians just feel very frustrated. And that was a big sentiment also in the office too when we had clients come in to purchase. It's just a lot of frustration because it is a really beautiful city. There's just a lot of things going on that um, hinder its growth. So obviously, the lockdowns were a massive issue in Victoria, and we're 5 years on now, and we're still seeing the effects of that, particularly in business confidence, obviously the property market as a whole, with all the taxes, the extended sort of, I guess you could say, lockdown effects. Um, and you see that through walking in the city in Victoria. So we have De Grave Street, which is a beautiful street in the heart of Melbourne CBD that used to have thousands of really beautiful, not thousands, but that's a bit of an exaggeration, but very many beautiful cafes. And a lot of them actually have just closed down and never reopened again as a result of harsh measures, licensing, things like that in general. So, but just seeing many people move, obviously interstate, um, and it's cheaper for them to run their businesses elsewhere interstate. So, definitely a lot of people moving in that regard.
And it's hard for me. Like I've been to Melbourne multiple times, and I love Melbourne. There's
Yeah.
so much there. It's when you compare it to Brisbane, where I'm from, we just don't have all the stuff that you have down in Melbourne. The cultural stuff. There's shows there. There's things to do. There's the sport. It's all happening. So it can be tricky for me to get my head around why people would be rushing away when you haven't lived there and haven't experienced some of the things that they've experienced there. And when you talk
Mm,
about COVID as the example, right? Like, and you said
mm,
5 years ago, but we haven't. It's like we haven't moved on because
yeah.
it's not just that. There were other issues at play that really have been hanging around. It's was sort of the start. It wasn't the end of the process when COVID ended. That's probably my view of it from an outside perspective.
Yeah, 100%. It's just not COVID alone, like you said, or the lockdowns. It was the suburban rail loop that's been going on for feels like 10 years, that's been over budgeted and overblown so many times. It's things like that that on a level should have been managed better, and therefore Victorians would have had confidence and they would have stayed in Victoria rather than leaving and going to different states that are budgeting and using the appropriate resources and the appropriate funding in the appropriate spaces. So it's a
That,
big
that's
one.
really that's really interesting. If you think through the consequences of this, because obviously there's something going on because the numbers
Mm,
are telling the story here.
yeah, yep.
You would imagine that that's going to have consequences flowing through if that were to continue. If you can continue to see
Mm,
population decline in Victoria, how are
mm.
you thinking about the consequences of that?
Well, of course, because they're people are taking their businesses with them. So it's not just the population that's declining; it's the economic growth that we could have had with the amount of people that we started with or, growing population that we did have in Victoria, with new jobs, new opportunities for people to create with businesses, that we probably aren't seeing at the moment due to those people leaving. So when we talk about economic decline in Victoria, it's not just population decline. It's not just the population that's declining with it. It's those economic opportunities that people lay the groundwork for, but we don't have those people in Victoria as such anymore to a large extent because they're all leaving. So, I've just had a look here. I've got some statistics. So, when we did have an increase in the population in 2016 to 2017, we actually had economic growth that was 3.8%. So that was just with an influx of people coming in. We've got a lot of people leaving. The data hasn't come out just as of yet, but I can imagine coming up to this election, there'll be more data revealed in terms of the economic downfall that's going on in Victoria as a result of the population decline.
We've just had a federal budget where a lot of people were saying it was quite a yawn fest. Really, there wasn't a whole lot of excitement in there.
Yeah.
As we head into an election sort of later this year. But when you think about what was going on in the budget in Victoria, is that at play as well? Are there generally concerns in the things that you've been looking at, the data you've been researching, suggesting that the way the government is operating is somehow at play here as well?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think overall there's a lack of confidence. I feel like every budget we do receive, we have the same concerns that come out of it, which is obviously these increased levies, increased taxes, and the government isn't managing the debt that we have at all, to the extent that they probably need to. And I think, and I'm just, reading out the statistics as well, we have large public sector debt in Victoria that has led to very high interest rate repayments for us. And they actually now account to 4.2 cents of every dollar of the state government revenue. So that's, that's quite a bit, considering we don't have that much revenue coming in as a result of cancelled events, Commonwealth Games that we don't have anymore. We obviously have a lot of people leaving, and the figures are actually expected to be, to rise to 7.7 cents of every dollar in 2027. So the financial position in Victoria has led to lower credit ratings compared to other states. We obviously have massive debt levels, and just means there's less new business, and it's less consumer confidence, less investor confidence, and it seems to be coming out of every budget we're seeing in Victoria at the moment.
Just as you were describing that, it sort of made sense to me a little bit of what some of the problem is here, because when you think about the debt situation, which is certainly not unique to Victoria, we know we've seen that right around the country, we've seen that around the world, lots of discussion around that in the US, particularly at the moment. But part of the bailout, if you like, for other states, particularly Queensland, West Australia that you mentioned, or that you've mentioned before when we've talked about this, is the mining and the resources. And I know we've often had that sort of bailout where the natural resources of the state end up digging you out of that debt hole. For Victoria, it's a little bit different. It does rely very heavily on those services and being an appealing place that people want to go. I mean, I know personally, you've gone to Victoria, you've gone to Melbourne for events that you simply, they've had almost the monopoly on these big events and big exciting things that you go, okay, we'll spend the money into that local economy because that's what they do. That's what they do really well. So the debt angle is an interesting one to me, because if you don't foster the thing that gives you the revenue to offset it, it could spiral quite
Yeah.
rapidly out of control.
Yeah, 100%. And Victoria is the events capital of Australia, and we've got business that is funding these events. And if we don't have those companies and those businesses in Victoria to put on those events, help host them, then we're, losing a battle of holding businesses up there.
You've talked to me before about the idea of skilled workers, particularly our tradies,
Yeah,
leaving Victoria and
yeah,
coming to Queensland, actually, a lot of them.
mm,
Um, I mean, I know when we talk about events, there's been a lot of discussion in Queensland around the Olympic Games 2032, how that's going to impact suburbs, how that's going to impact. Like, generally, I would say the feeling is one of excitement. There's a lot of controversy, as there always is in these
mm,
things, but there's generally a feeling of excitement, at least in the circles that I'm speaking to, where people are going, well, this is great for Brisbane, it's great for these areas because we're getting that money, that investment, that skill pumped into that local economy around that event.
mm.
What's your take on that, particularly this idea of the skilled workers leaving Victoria? Is that anything to do with things like the Olympics, or is it other prospects? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're seeing specifically people in the construction industry moving in droves to Queensland. They have more work here, and it's stable. Stable work in Victoria. When they announced the Commonwealth Games, they said it was going to create thousands of jobs, and they started going through hiring processes, things like that for construction. They were set to build new stadiums in Bendigo, even in the CBD. All those people that were lined up to have that job for so many years have just had that taken from them. So those are the people that are probably moving over to Queensland, and particularly for the Olympics, they've got solid work for the next couple of years. But they're people that we need in Victoria too to build homes and other infrastructure assets, but they won't obviously be there because they're moving to Queensland, and they're not going to stay in Victoria if they don't have solid work. And if the government can't pay for the suburban rail loop, what's to say that they can't pay for other major infrastructure projects that they've promised the public and also promised construction workers as well?
That's really interesting. I think that's a good place to end it here. That a lot of this is probably around uncertainty. I think that's probably the
Yeah.
summary I would take from everything you've discussed with us today. That it's not anyone saying Victoria is not a place that you want to live. Like there's so much opportunity and so many great things that are available there, particularly in Melbourne, the regions, all of that is such an opportunity, such a place that people would want to live. It's just when you've got that uncertainty, you have to make the tough decisions. And it appears like a lot of people are making that tough decision to say, look, we liked it here. They may have loved it there, but going, we just can't handle this level of uncertainty. So we're going to pack up and move somewhere else.
Yeah, 100%. And especially if people have families they have to look after, they want to be in a stable job and make sure that they have that stable future and outcome for the next couple of years.
Makes a lot of sense. Look,
Yeah,
always appreciate your work on this. Thanks for your deep dive. Really appreciate it today.
no worries. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.